My parents divorced in 2006. I was 17 when they split, right before their 18-year anniversary. It had been a long time coming. My dad sustained a head injury 4 years prior, which led to a significant change in his drinking and drug use, escalating from occasional to a cyclone of crazy. My mom took a risk and left my dad. He moved out, and we remained in the same house. We had moved from our small town to a small city near our state's capital. It was weird, but the first month he was gone, we had a peace we never knew we could have. And I remember feeling actually free for the first time in my life till that point. My dad had to be supervised by state police when he collected his stuff, as he was violent and threatened to kill me on several occasions. He never cleared out the basement but left garbage, so my mom, myself, and some friends who hung out at the time helped with the cleanup effort, and we ended up getting overall $200 in returns from all the beer cans. My friends and I got different furniture, instruments, stereos, and a fridge to put soda and beers in as we took over the garage and basement. My friends and I discovered my dad had been growing weed in the basement, as he left all of his plants and equipment behind. At the time, it was illegal in my state. My mom has a job where she could get fired and lose her license as well. My friends and I didn't want to get involved with selling any of it, and we honestly were just interested in having fun on our terms. We liked to drink, but beyond that, it never got into anything more, so we threw it all out. My dad had told us he got everything. That was it, and I would never have to interact with him again. Really, he gave me up during the family court stuff. Our house is on a hill and borders the actual city, which has alleyway access which led to the small backyard. The basement access was outside only and was kept with a padlock, and the door itself was pretty sturdy. The house was next to a diner and a storage garage, so everything closed after 5 p.m. And there were other houses the street as well, and is a main drag that connects you to a small highway. I don't remember when it started, but I recall my dad would call our house nightly drunk and accusing my mom of cheating. As he was already living with another woman at this time as well, he would call crying and just belligerent some nights. Then we started having people prowl around the house. It started very subtly until my special needs sister started seeing a ski-masked man at her window. I often would chase someone away with a bat some nights alone by myself, or watching my sister as my mom had to work multiple jobs. I started working as well. I would often wait up most nights and would just patrol making sure everyone was safe. And most nights it was nothing. I developed a good layer of trauma from all of this, and a caffeine addiction, as I was always on alert. I had suspected a few of my dad's friends, especially since they were very interested in the basement. I'm not a small person. Having given up football, I had trained to play for a D1 school, so I was still fresh from all of it, and was very strong still. One night in particular, I remember being awoken by my bedroom window being tampered with. I looked and saw a man in a ski mask trying to open my window with a large hunting knife in his mouth. I snuck down to the floor and crawled out of my room, making my way into the living room. I grabbed the Louisville Slugger I kept near the front door. Donning my shoes and jacket to combat the winter chill, I snuck outside and confronted a man I recognized as one of my dad's friends. He began talking trash and mocking me, but I warned him to leave or face consequences. When he swung a knife at me, I deftly pulled back and struck his shoulder with all my strength, hearing bones crack. His shoulder moved unnaturally as he collapsed into the snow. Straddling him, I removed his ski mask and started pummeling him. My mom and neighbors rushed out, struggling to pull me off him. As we waited for the police, he regained consciousness and attempted to flee, but his movements were labored. He hopped into a passing car and escaped before we could stop him. This incident occurred before the prevalence of Ring doorbells and widespread security systems. We all provided our accounts, and the cops confiscated his knife. Things remained quiet for a while, but that summer, I cornered the same guy in our dark, small yard. He demanded his equipment from the basement. I told him we tossed it, and he charged at me. I picked up a large garden brick we had piled back there and swung it overhand, hitting him in the same place I had months prior. I heard bones break again. This time, I sat on him as he kicked and screamed. My mom called the cops, and they actually arrested him. They told me that I had broken his collarbone and that he wanted to press charges. Nothing ever came of it, and after which the whole situation ended up blowing over and it all stopped. My dad admitted he was involved and wasn't sorry that he pitted these men against his kids and ex-wife, which has altered my relationship with him. I saw that man during the pandemic as our city had a lot of public gatherings and such. And while I am not the same person, I was very happy to see him have a level of healthy fear. Also, another one of the guys involved I had run into as well, at same event last year, was very cautious about me, and referenced he didn't want me to do what I did to his friend. These guys are 1 point used to fight, and run with rowdy people with my dad. And it felt good to know that as someone who doesn't get violent, that people who do have a healthy fear, to never mess with my family, or to try to break into my home because there are consequences. I used to live in a small neighborhood from ages 13 to 18. This took place when I was around 15. I spent most of my time just walking around the neighborhood, listening to my MP3 player. There was a guy around the same age as me who lived maybe 5 or so houses down from me. From neighborhood gossip, I learned that he was homeschooled and had been in and out of juvie due to his anger issues. He was almost always outside, and sometimes when I passed his house, he would start following me. I was smart enough to always have my music down low enough to be able to hear and be aware of my surroundings. At first, I just passed it off as he just ended up walking the same time of day I did. Looking back, I was truly dumb. As time passed, he got closer and closer to me when following, until he eventually decided to come up right behind me. He said some truly heinous things that I will not repeat here. I mean, he was right in my ear when he was talking. I ran home and told my sister. She was basically who raised me. She told me I was lying and to stop making up stories. For a while, I stopped going out walking, until I needed the fresh air and exercise and tried again after maybe 2 months. Sure enough, there he was, and came right up behind me and started to say things again. I turned my music up and ignored him. This is what I continued to do every day, until he got tired of me ignoring him, I guess, because one day he grabbed my arm. I couldn't get away, and then he grabbed the back of my neck and told me that I should know better than to ignore him. Again, I told my sister. She didn't believe me, and I stopped going out again. 2 weeks later, I woke up to loud bangs on my bedroom wall. There was a garage on both sides of the house, and the wall of my bedroom shared a wall with one of the garages. This garage was unfinished. There wasn't even concrete down, and it was easily accessible from outside as it was missing the door at the back of the house. My sister was out of town, and my dad was deaf and bedridden, so it was just me in the house able to do anything. My bedroom also had a door to go outside, so I ran over and locked it. I laid down and waited for the banging to stop, but it didn't. My cousin and her boyfriend lived down the street, so I called her.
Hello? Someone is outside. I'm scared.
She sent her boyfriend down to see what it was. Her boyfriend pulled right into the backyard and right up to the door into the garage. His headlights filled the garage and outran the guy from down the street, holding a large knife. He took off running, and my cousin's boyfriend followed. It was at this time I called the police. They came and took a statement, but said there was nothing they could do because, other than going into the garage and trespassing, he didn't actually do anything. I never took a walk in that neighborhood again. I still wonder how he knew what wall to bang on. How did he know I was on the other side of it? How did he know my sister was gone, or that my dad was bedridden and couldn't do anything? I never locked the door, so had he been in my house to know? What would have happened if I would have gone outside? It still gives me the creeps. I used to hang out with my cousin a lot. We're both male and were 10 years old at the time of this encounter, and I'm now 33. It has stayed with me ever since. We'd mostly spend our youth roaming the streets, not causing trouble, but kicking footballs around fields, climbing, hanging out with kids our age, the typical stuff before iPads and Netflix became commonplace. One day we decided to go and explore a part of town that we'd never explored before. It meant going through alleyways and back streets. The trail would actually end approximately 2 or 3 minutes from my house, which was a safe part of the neighborhood. It was a sunny day, albeit not too warm, and my cousin and I had been walking for what seemed like miles. The journey we'd planned was supposed to go on for longer, but we'd got bored and decided to take a detour home. The detour involved cutting through an alleyway that looked a little bit like the Coronation Street Ginnel, if anyone is familiar with the TV show. To the left of us were terraced houses, and to the right of us, steel fences with sharp points to deter any would-be thieves. We continued up here, and soon enough, one of the kids from our school lived there, and his mum shouted, "What are you boys doing here?" We ran. I don't know why. We just didn't like her son, and her tone was accusatory. As we ran, we bumped into another kid. "Don't go that way," he said, as his voice trailed off as he ran further and further away from us, down the opposite end of the alleyway. It got darker with the trees and foliage, but we soon emerged from the alley. And that's when we saw the lone boy. A boy aged 10 or 12 stood there. His eyes were empty. He had a vacant look on his face. Well, the half of his face that we could see well enough. Above his mouth was covered with a veil, somewhat like a Halloween mask of some description. Except, it was June. Halloween was months away. As we got closer, we noticed the boy had a kitchen knife in his hands. I mean a fully real stainless steel kitchen knife, both hands on the handle. The sunlight made the blade glisten. We cracked a joke. "Cooking outside?" But he looked at us blankly. No emotion. Nothing. We were too freaked out to move. And that's when we realized he hadn't moved either. Not a muscle. We saw him blink, but physically, the knife hadn't been raised up or pointed at us, just held closely to his chest, blade pointing upwards. We figured we should get away because instinct told us this was weird and a bit freaky. Going back down the alley didn't seem like a safe option. Being stuck in an alleyway with a strange kid with a knife didn't seem smart. In front of us was a road on a steep hill. It was our best bet. We walked up to the top of the hill, keeping an eye on the kid. The top of the hill was 2-3 minutes from my house in terms of distance. At last, we felt safe. As we looked back down the hill, the lone kid had put the knife by his leg, now holding it in one hand, but remained in the exact same spot and stared right back up at us, expressionless. We told our parents what had happened, and they called a local community enforcement team to scout the area. Apparently the kid was found with the knife, but we never heard why he was there or what he was doing. 23 years later, whatever happened, it's still on my mind. Growing up, we had a group of family friends who were the sweetest people ever. The parents had one biological daughter and an older son and daughter that they adopted from the mother's sister, who was a drug addict and lost custody of the kids. We went on family camping trips and vacations with them and are still family friends to this day. The older adopted daughter was a gorgeous blonde girl in my brother's grade. They were both 22 at the time. She liked to go partying and experimented with club drugs, but had no serious drug addictions to my knowledge. The adopted brother at some point gatewayed from being a stoner to a full-on heroin addict, while the younger biological daughter was kind of a shy, mousy, good girl type. The oldest daughter, let's call her Claire, decided to take a road trip with some friends for a skiing trip. After the skiing trip was over, she was offered a ride back home from one of her friends who was a notoriously bad driver, so she declined and opted to find a ride from someone else. When that friend drove home that night, he got into a fatal car wreck. Devastated, her and her friends ended up planning to drive down to his funeral wake services, and on the drive over there, they drove off the road and flipped their car, getting into a huge, fiery car crash. When the police arrived to the scene, they investigated the crash and explained that a spark ignited the gas tank, causing the explosive fire. They said this is an incredibly rare occurrence. While the car was flipped, the driver, who happened to be deeply in love with Allison, was able to escape from the driver's seat, while Allison, who was knocked unconscious and stuck in her seatbelt, most likely burned to death in the blaze despite his best efforts to save her. My brother used to say her death was inevitable and meant to be, which I personally think is messed up. But the concept of avoiding death one night and then dying in another car accident immediately after is a terrifying idea that is either a freak coincidence or something more supernatural, driven by destiny. Not sure where I stand on this, but the story has stuck with me ever since. It is also an example of adopted children born from a mother who was addicted to drugs while pregnant, and the genetic predisposition for drug use that is innate in the children that result from that pregnancy.